We're live. Good evening, everybody, or good morning if you're in the west coast of the United States. Happy Wednesday to you, wherever you are in the world. You've probably become accustomed to the fact by now that I sort of fly the flag during these broadcasts with the T-shirt well, sometimes anyway, and today's no exception. So while this is not related to the subject matter we'll be discussing today, I thought it is very relevant to the fact that we're living in a world of pandemic lockdown, and we all know that this is going to be happening. I've said publicly before, and I'll say it again, I will be refusing any vaccine or any treatment for this virus or any other, frankly, if it's been tested on animals, which of course it inevitably will have been. So if you saw the interview that I did with our wonderful mutual friend Peter Egan, he talked about this a little bit, and we'll have him back to talk about it in more detail. Animal experimentation is absolutely unforgivable, and it's unnecessary, and it's completely irrelevant in about 98% of cases. And I've had an idea. So before I introduce my wonderful guest for this evening, I want to leave you with this idea, boiling away in the back of your mind. They're always talking about finding appropriate punishments for animal abusers. Test on them. And therefore they're repaying their debt to society, and they're giving the animals a break because they owe them one as well. So how about that? Test on animal abusers. Then they're doing everyone a favor. Sounds about right to me. So just an idea. Let's maybe keep that one in mind and push a little suggestion through to the government at some point. Anyway, as I said, that's not related to the subject matter for tonight, but as is always the case, always the subject matter is something that I think is important and that needs to be exposed, addressed, discussed. And my guests are always people who deeply inspire me, who I admire deeply, and who I think lead the way. They shine their light into the world on their particular issue, or issues, plural, and they do so in a way that inspires us all, and they often empower us to help the animals, even if it's indirectly through them. And tonight, I'm very, very excited to introduce you to my guest, who I think brings another level of that, which is, I think, unusual. I think it's to an extent that I think a lot of you will find this is quite fascinating and unique, and also very reassuring to know that there's people who feel this way and get this level of understanding with animals. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my dear friend from the Springwood Mindfulness Sanctuary, Jacqui Howe. Hey.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Oh, wonderful. It's so great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a real privilege. I think, as I said, I'm going to let you talk about things in your own way, but also we've been talking, Jacqui and I, about running this particular episode in a slightly new format, which I think will really work well, especially with the subject matter we're going to talk about. But Springwood is a magical place, which I have once had the privilege of visiting, and I say I want to let Jacqui talk about it, because there's certain mindsets underpinning everything that happens there, which are frankly beautiful, and I think very important and exemplary. But what we're going to do tonight is, because I know that Jacqui, as per the promo that you guys would have seen, wants to talk about the realities of the horse racing industry, which, let's not beat around the bush, are a disgrace. And we're going to talk about that. And as always, you guys know I don't want to talk about anything brutal, and I'm not going to show you anything graphic. I never do, and I'm not going to. But we're going to be talking about some dark stuff. And it's necessary. And if we're going to address any of these problems, we need to understand what they are, and we're going to have to go there. However, what we're going to do is we're going to spend the first half of this discussion, the next 20 or 30 minutes, talking about that reality, and we're going to spend the second half of the discussion talking about the positives and Springwood in particular, because Springwood is a gigantic positive. And so please, when we go into this first half of it, stick with us, because we're not going to leave you without some positivity and light and hope and beauty, and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about when we get there. So please stick around. And again, Jacqui, welcome. So grateful to have you here. And tell us a little bit about the background of how Springwood got started in the first instance.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me here and for all of your interviews. I've loved them all. They've been great and very inspiring. So
thank you. And when I say tell me a little tiny bit about Springwood, let's do that. Please do tell me a little bit, just to give people a little foundation. But we will jump right into the discussion topic that Jacqui wants to cover, which is the reality of horse racing. So, but yeah, over to you, Jacqui.
So the sanctuary looks at horses' physiological and psychological needs, and instead of trying to meet our needs, which is the general way that we as horse owners and horse keepers all around the world do, and looking at them as a way of meeting our entertainment needs, we at the sanctuary look at how we can meet the horse's needs, looking at the wild horse model and what they were born to be, and basically just to be a beautiful sentient living animal, and to give them those needs and to meet them. And our herd, so our herd is a herd that lives as a forever herd at the sanctuary. So we're a true sanctuary in that respect.
Absolutely, and that's something that's key. As I said in the promo for this conversation, it really is a true sanctuary, and Jacqui will go into that in detail. But this segues nicely into exactly as we've discussed, going straight into the realities, and simply because of the fact that the reason that your sanctuary exists is because it has to, largely based on what we're about to discuss.
Yeah.
So your background couldn't be more appropriate to this conversation. Tell people how you're in a position to be able to talk about this.
Okay, so I'm not proud to say, but I think it helps people to understand that I'm not standing in complete judgment of others and not having been there myself. I have ridden for 35 years of my life, since I was a young child up to about sort of 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. And I have even been involved in the racing industry quite big time, and I'll explain about that a little bit when we get into the racing and what my kind of light bulb moments were in that. But yeah, I've sort of done everything very traditionally, had a very that conventional mindset that if people are watching who have horses or have had horses in their lives will know that, you know, it's very drummed into us that we look after them in a certain way and we don't deviate from that, because otherwise you've got this big powerful creature that will dominate you and they will take advantage. And I think that kind of underpins everything. And if you've gone in from a young child, you're sort of totally indoctrinated into that. And there are lots of people who come to our sanctuary who say, this is what I wanted when I wanted to connect with ponies and horses, and I was sent to a riding school and I was made to ride and I just wanted to hang out. So, and I think at our heart, that's what we do. We resonate with their beautiful hearts and this, you know, wildness of our horse. And then it's so ironic that everything we do is to make them unwild and completely, you know, yeah, shut down to any of their instinctive kind of behavior, which is, and just to kind of like, you know, cover that, which then helps, I think, people to understand, you know, what a horse's needs are and how they're not being met. A horse is a herd animal, and they need to live in a herd, and they are also a prey animal, so they're preyed upon, and every single thing about them is sort of hardwired, fine-tuned to survive as a prey animal and living as a herd. So their eyesight is phenomenal. They can't see right in front of between their eyes, and they can't see right on their tail, but they can see a pretty much 360. And their ears will rotate and swivel, and their hearing is phenomenal. So they can hear where sound's coming from. They've got an amazing sense of smell. And they even have an ability to sleep standing up. They've got locking stifle joints, so they're ready to take off at a moment's notice.
Wow.
And quite often you'll see a horse just resting one leg and then in a sleep. And it's quite rare that horses really relax enough to completely lie down, especially in a whole herd setting, to be able to, generally if some lie down, there will be some on lookout. And they've still got that in their DNA, and that's absolutely, completely in their instincts. They've got an amazing ability to, know what they need as far as wild medicinal herbs and what they need in their grazing. In the wild they will be able to select like nature's medicine cabinet and be able to heal themselves. And if they are given as wild horses, the sort of Mustang model, etc., they're given enough different terrains with rocky and wet and dry and sandy and stuff, they will trim their own feet and get really well balanced, and they will be much healthier because of that.
It makes perfect sense, of course, because nature does that, doesn't it? Without our interference, without our help, left to its own devices, it does a perfect job.
Exactly. So it's very much like a wild animal would do, a tiger or a lion or a cheetah, any of the beautiful creatures that you've been talking about in some of your lovely interviews or chats. So and they have the capacity to rewild themselves, especially if you're talking about the native ponies and the native horses, the ones we fiddled around with for racing, for example, like the thoroughbreds. There is I've been on this journey with them and learning how much we can kind of rewild them and help them to live as naturally as possible. There are things that they need quite a bit of support with. As far as riding is concerned, I should mention that I've been riding for 35 odd years, and I totally get it when people say they have this telepathic bond with their horse and it's amazing and they only go out for a gentle hack and and what they have is something really special, because I totally felt like that when I rode.
Sure.
So, completely get that.
Yeah.
What I'd say is that the bond that I have now is way better than any experience I'd ever had in the rest of my life with the horses that I have now, and I have no desire to sit on their backs.
And I've seen it, and I can say categorically, it's and you'll see it yourselves a little later on. But carry on, Jacqui. Sorry, I just wanted to say, because I think it's absolutely apparent when you see your interaction with the herd. The bond is beautiful and very, very profoundly deep.
It is. Yeah. It's really lovely, and it's on a. My feeling is it's on a soul connection level.
Absolutely.
Incredibly intimate, and that very without touch. I've always thought that touch is the sort of most intimate thing, of actually dropping into a meditative, still, peaceful, deeply peaceful, healing state with another being that has complete autonomy and free choice. Is much more intimate than anything else that you go into touch in that space and it breaks it completely. So it's
sure.
And I think people say to me quite often, oh, but we have this amazing bond and my horse picks up on everything that I'm thinking and they do it. And I remember doing that. I remember doing dressage lessons and thinking I'm going to go across the diagonal here. And before I'd even given them any aids, the horse was doing it, and thought, wow, we are just in sync. What I would say is the horse is picking up on your thoughts because they are hardwired to survive. They are needing to know that everything around them is safe. They're tuning in with everybody and everything around them completely. And so, of course, they're going to do that. And especially if you're completely in the moment, in that riding lesson or whatever, dressage test, and you're totally focused on that link, that level of animal communication. That's exactly what animal communication is: being completely mindful, being very still and focused, and they can completely pick up on their feelings, on our feelings. However, how many times do people in that situation say, I can feel exactly what my horse is thinking in that time. And that's a different, you know, we just, it never occurred to me to think, how are they feeling today? It's like, they know that I'm feeling like going for a good gallop, or I just want to have a plod around the block, not how are they actually feeling. So yeah, that's my kind of like, I think one big thing that I think is the missing link there when we're riding.
Well, and you know, as you quite rightly say, I mean, every now and then you'll hear people say, you know, I just could sense that my horse really wanted to just open up and go for a gallop or whatever, and that's about the extent of it. But there's never any consideration for, does the horse feel like doing this today? It's never for the horse's sake, it's for the enjoyment of the person. And of course, all we're talking about at this stage is just leisure riding. We're not even talking about the we're not even into the industry yet. So we've got issues, and we're not talking about what unbelievable.
I sort of fobbed myself off with the fact that I wouldn't compete anymore and I would just be a happy hacker, but that didn't meet the, you know, things. Eventually I was like, okay, this isn't working for me, I need to take another step. So my kind of my light bulb moment of awareness really came when my daughter, a little tiny gorgeous little girl at 7 years old, went for a riding lesson, and I was lying on the grass, beautiful sunny day, looking up at the fluffy clouds and listening to her having her riding lesson in this group next to me, much as I did when I was a child, and you know, probably lots of people in that privileged sort of way, you know. And I heard in my little you know, whatever, you know, little idyllic state, heard the riding instructor going, kick them on, use your whip, don't let them get away with it, kick them on. And it was like this, literally like this slap round the face to me. I just suddenly went, whoa, what other animal would it be acceptable for us to say that to? And but it's
absolutely.
And you're teaching young kids that it's okay to beat up an animal and kick them and whip them
to get them to do what you want them to do.
And I think that actually, the fact that people don't even question it, it's like, well, that's what you do.
Well, and we're going to get into that because that's one of the key issues we're dealing with when it comes to horse racing. It's very similar in a way, in principle, to the discussion around plant-based living, plant-based eating, because it's so deeply ingrained in the psyche. It's so conditioned into people that it's normal. It's absolutely mainstream. It's conditioned to the point of normalization, as per what you've just said. So whether that's the slaughter of billions of animals to feed people, or the kicking of a horse in order to make it go in a certain direction, it's so considered as part of our underlying psyche that we're numbed to it. It's like watching the news and you see bombs going off and people missing and murdered, and you flick onto the next channel and carry on with your day because we're numb to these things. And carry on, because this is where we're not going to allow that kind of numbness.
And it's that cognitive dissonance. It's exactly the same as eating meat, and exactly the same as of so many things that we do in our lives, that we just accept what we're told is okay. And I was told that horses like this, and what would we do, like we wouldn't have horses in our lives if we didn't do this, and told all of these things that justified, they're numb on their sides, and when you put a bit in their mouth, their mouth's numb, and this is the most sensitive structure in the world. Their faces are they have all of these incredibly sensitive pressure points. You put a bridle on, and even if it's a bitless bridle, it's working, instead of the bit in the mouth, it's working on pressure points here. And there are natural horsemanship trainers that have devised bridles, head collars that have got knots, so they dig into these sensitive places. So it looks like you're putting a little tiny bit of gentle pressure on, and it's actually putting so much force here. Or ones that have two nose bands that you put a little bit of seemingly gentle force on, and it tightens up like hell. So then, of course, the horse is going to do something, because they're doing everything they can to alleviate that pain. And back to the wild horse model, and looking at them as a herd, they will run with the herd if they're chased. So if you think of a wildlife documentary, when you see the chase, when you see the kill, what happens is that the lion or the tiger or the cheetah or whatever will pick on the animal that is least is the weakest.
Of course.
So the horse knows that instinctively they have to hide their pain. They will do everything they can to hide their pain and not show their weakness, and they will do everything they can to keep up with the herd. So if one gallops off, they will all gallop off. It's just
Right.
a flight and fear, flight, fight, kind of like, we've got to go. It's just straight hardwired into them.
Right. So this is in their DNA, making them the perfect target for being susceptible to training and to being pushed to their very limits.
Not show their pain.
Which leads us into the racing industry, which is
which
is where things start to get really nasty.
Exactly. So not to show the pain and to go into shutdown. So a lot of horses will go into absolute conditioned acceptance of shutdown to make themselves small. And again, another light bulb moment for me was realizing, having done, in this time, I was just getting myself out of a very toxic relationship of being. It was a pretty abusive relationship, and I did everything I could to make myself small and compliant and manage the situation. So I suddenly saw that analogy of, like, they are not doing this willingly. They are going into complete conditioned acceptance to make themselves safe, because otherwise they're going to be the ones that get taken down.
Sure. Yeah.
So that was and there were all sorts of things with riding that I won't go into here, because I think you've got a link that you were going to put up about Stormy May's post.
I probably do. I actually didn't find that one, but
okay.
But what we have, I've got a couple of things I want to share. But what I wanted, when you just talked about horses in that way, you reminded me of something else we discuss on this series. Again, I think with Peter Egan and others, is elephant back riding, because what we're discussing here is very similar in the sense that the only way that's going to be allowed by an elephant, and indeed by the sound of it a horse, is if the consequences of not allowing it are too steep.
Exactly.
And they get their spirits broken.
People are getting it with elephants. It's exactly, so people are actually understanding it with elephants now, and it's like, thank God.
Right.
So, there is awareness that most people who go traveling, well, most people in my circle, thank goodness, I don't know whether the mainstream, actually are aware that actually going elephant riding is they've had their will severely broken in order to get there. And the same happens with a horse. They have to have their will broken in order to have that tack on them. And so, just to throw in that there will be a link about all of the pain that a horse endures when they're ridden, and studies that prove this. And I'd also just like to throw in there that actually, if you if you think your horse loves riding so much, then just get on it without any tack at all and take them down the road. You won't be able to. They won't want to do that. You might be able to sit on your horse without any tack on them and maybe take a few sort of, steps around the field or whatever, but actually taking them out for a ride.
Right. I'm going to share that. I will share that screen. I've found it.
Okay. Cool.
But you carry on. You carry on, because I don't want to play the sound of it, because it probably won't do it justice. But while Jacqui's referring to these, this is exactly what Jacqui's talking about.
It's
right?
I mean, I think it's quite a long YouTube. It's just for people to, if they want to look into into the effects of riding. There aren't many studies because they tend to get shut down. Like there was one that I'd seen a while back, and I tried to find it to share for this, and it had actually been shut down. It had been shut down by the Association of Master Saddlers. Can you believe?
So, look at this. This looks like a torture chamber.
Right, exactly.
I'm going to switch it off just because I have a feeling that it will go places that we don't want to go. But it's
into the physiology of the horse and their muscle structure, and actually the damage we do without even knowing, and the blood circulation that gets cut off, and the nerves that get impinged after just 10 minutes of being on their back. and that's if you're a light rider.
Right.
So, you know,
all of which is completely ignored because people like a day at the races. Now, this is where this one will get controversial, and let's just be straight down the line about it. Controversy is the least of our concern because thousands of horses are suffering as a result of this on a daily basis. At least in lockdown, that's not happening, which is another benefit of the lockdown. But under normal circumstances, and of course they're still suffering. It's just like a Premier League football team. They haven't just all started sitting around on their sofa eating crisps. They're still in training. The horses are still being pushed. They're still being kept fit and ready for when the racing opens again. So all of the cruelty we're talking about is still ongoing, and we have to get this. And we've been trying for years. I've been trying. I'm proud to be a patron for Springwood, and I'm going to say it right now. And you guys know Jacqui's here to talk about the real brutal horrors of the horse racing industry. And I stand shoulder to shoulder with you, Jacqui, and will continue to do so. And this is again one of those examples of where we need to get the community together and stand firmly together on this and break that perception that people have that like all of the things Jacqui's talked about so far are unpleasant, painful, sometimes and frequently in fact deadly to horses. And we're going to get into it in a little bit more detail before we start talking about the beauty and the positives. But this is all accepted as absolute mainstream. It's endorsed by royalty. It's on BBC. It's on Channel 4. It's on Channel 5. It's on every single back page of the newspaper. Even with things like the Grand National, where anyone who's not involved in horse racing or interested on a normal day in horse racing, suddenly they'll go and have a quick flutter on the Grand National, and it's absolutely directly contributing to this cruelty that we're talking about. So there's no time for.
You did a great post a while back about every single person who gambles contributes to that industry, and that's so true. It's us as punters. It's not, it's not the owners and the trainers and the race courses are actually perpetuating it. It's us who gamble who pay into that industry, and it's the gambling that actually keeps going. So
that's where the money's coming from.
Stop.
Now, you've got first-hand knowledge of the insider knowledge of the racing industry.
I have. So
just give us a couple of snapshots. Just give us a couple of ideas of of commonplace things that happen that is hidden from public view.
Okay. So we're talking about breaking the wheel with elephants. We're talking about breaking the wheel just to ride them. Their bones aren't fully developed until they're six years old. Most ridden horses are broken in at about 4 or 5 years old, if they're lucky. A racehorse is broken in at a year old and on the track racing when they're 2.
All right, so let's just let that land. Under normal circumstances, you're saying their bones are fully developed at the age of 6, and the racing industry will start training them at 1 and race them at 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's the foundation of how wrong this is, and yet somehow permitted. Carry on, Jacqui, because I just find this. I find this is one of those sorts of things that,
like the Derby, which is one of the premier sort of races in the flat racing calendar.
Right.
They're for 3-year-olds. So you've got to get them in at 2 to be able to stop being able to get out there and competing. So that is a shocking thing in itself. That they're quite often dead before they've even fully developed their bodies.
And of course we hear the high profile ones when it happens right in front of a grandstand, and it's on the sports pages because of the fact that it was impossible to hide from public view. And we're going to cover something in just a second to show you the extent of that. However, the kind of thing you're talking about right there, the public would never have any reason to know, and they're certainly not going to tell us, right? So there's thousands and thousands of horses dying as a result of this.
Yeah.
And that's before they even get into racing.
Yeah, definitely. So unless it's in where the camera is, when it's televised, or if it's right in front of the grandstand, they will, it's covered up. So there's a brilliant site called the Animal the Horse Death Watch. You've got a link to it. Animal Aid Horse Race Death Watch, which tells you how many horses have died. It's a really great site, I think, because it doesn't show you graphic in horrible images that are going to stick in your brain, but it says the name of the horse, their age, the race course they died at, and how they died, and how many horses have died in that month, week, year. Right.
So you guys can see this on screen right now.
You can pay tribute to those beautiful beings who have lost their lives, and they're given their name, and rather than it just being it's another statistic. So I think they do a good job in trying to expose stuff. There are, however, and I'll tell you about how I found out about this in a minute. There are, however, a lot of horses that don't even make that list because it's a cover-up.
Of course. And by the way, guys, when Jacqui says they do a good job, she's referring to Animal Aid. So you can see the logo on the site here. This is the page right here. It's literally horsedeathwatch.com.
It's nothing to do with the industry. This is trying to expose the horrors in the racing industry.
Quite, yeah, absolutely. So please go check it out. It's horsedeathwatch.com. Giles will put that link up, no doubt, in just a second. As you can see from that, right on the headline there. And keep in mind, when you look at those numbers, that no racing's been happening since Cheltenham, thank God. But it's happening at a rate almost of one every other day.
It is.
That's the known ones.
And last year, I think it was 202 deaths in the year. So it was a bit more than
one every other day. Exactly. So this number's
20,000 horses in the racing industry. And and we're losing one every other day. And then,
there you go.
They're coming in.
So, by the way, also, as Jacqui says, guys, you can see in the section here, course. It's literally Market Rasen, Kempton Park, Cheltenham, Hereford, Carlisle, Exeter, and on and on and on it goes. Ascot, Newbury, all of the race courses that corporate days out will go to, to treat their employees. Yeah. People will go and have a little bit of a booze up and get dressed up and have a great time. And this is the cost. This is the cost. No, make no mistake about it. This is the cost of that fun day out in a crappy looking suit or cocktail.
I loved your statement before when you did that thing of like, if you want to dress up and go and have a nice drink somewhere as an entertainment, just dress up and go down into the park or whatever. You don't need to go to a race course. And it's like,
I mean, it's when you think about it, it's like it comes back down to that discussion we were having earlier about conditioning, where it's not just that it's okay, that it's overlooked, that it's ignored. It's the fact that it's celebrated. It's actually taken to the point of celebrating this level of death of an animal that's supposed to be revered in this country.
As we were sort of saying, unless it's right in front of the grandstand or it's in front of the cameras and it's covered up, but actually when it's in front of the grandstand, it's incredibly sickening. And I was involved in the racing industry, and I just don't know how I managed to have that amount of cognitive dissonance. I just wasn't actually physically sick about it. There's a green screen that goes around, bit of material, bit of metal. I'm sure you've seen, if you've ever watched racing, you've seen it on the thing. Green screen that goes up. I mean, they do it on the Grand National just to kind of like, there's a bit of stuff you don't want to be seeing there. You've got a little bit of green material between people dressed up drinking champagne and having a lovely time, and a horse so much in pain and traumatized that it has to be shot. And then a silent bullet going through its skull.
And of course, if we can,
the position is.
If we can, and I want to just pick up on that point you just made, because of course the only reason that these animals need to be, because in some cases I dare say it is the case, of course, that they're in such pain, they've broken their back or neck and they're still alive. Of course, there's no hope for that animal. They should never have been put in the position in the first place. But let's not make any mistake about this either. There is one thing on the mind of a racehorse owner, and that's money. The horse's well-being is very important to them for the simple reason that they make the money if their well-being is taken care of, nothing else. And therefore, if a horse breaks its leg, which is by no means a fatal injury, it does mean that it will never win them another race or make them any more money or become a breeding horse for it's not going to be lucrative for them, and that's why they're put to death for that. Let's not call it put to sleep. They're put to
and
death.
if you look on that list, a lot of them, it just says broken down. Is a, you know, it doesn't mean they've broken they've broken down they've broken their wind, they've broken, you know, and they can be rehabilitated through that. But yeah, as you say, they choose not to, because it's not
cost effective
to do so. They are consumables.
Right, there you go. Jacqui, give us that insight into how you found this out, and then we're gonna move on to the positives, because I want to make sure we cover the positives. But tell us how you found this out, because there's.
Okay. Well, I mean, just very, very briefly, you know, I was engaged to somebody who owned Lingfield Park Racecourse. So there I was, bang straight in this. Right, I have a lot of insider information on how bad racing is, and I lived at the racecourse, and we had our horses that we kept in a yard by the track. And one day I went down to check them, and there was blood all over the yard. And I was terrified that something had happened to one of our horses, and realised that they were all okay. So I went to find out where this blood had come from, and I was just told, oh, that's the meat van. The horse had died on the track, and it got washed out there, which is disgusting in front of other animals that are going to sense blood and death and everything. But it was more like, well, I didn't see any horses die on the track. So, you know, like, what the hell? And then said, oh, well, but it wasn't in eyesight, and the cameras weren't on it. So it's just, you know, disposed of. And it was the way that it was just passed off of like, this is just so commonplace, that made me realise and then start looking out for. And sure enough, it was very commonplace that's what happened. It was just, you know, and it was fine to just wash out a whole load of blood. And, you know, it's just in that sort of completely expendable kind of mindset that there's a beautiful being.
Right.
Its life, you just, you know, it goes off to the dog meat market or the human meat market.
Total disconnect.
Absolutely.
And keep in mind, as we talk about this, everybody, this is what is widely regarded as one of the most revered, loved animals in this country.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind.
I think one of the big things also I wanted to say is something that everybody says to me, and something that I used to ask when I was a child. My grandfather used to love racing. He was really into it. So it was kind of normalized in my childhood. Yeah. And I said, which is, I guess, why I never really questioned anything and went on to kind of like be so involved. You know, do the horses love it? And I said, of course the horses love it. Look, there's a jockey that's fallen off and the horse is still carrying on. Doesn't that just prove to you how much the horse loves it? And that's a classic line. Yeah. And then going back to what I was saying about earlier of their herd animals, they will keep up, come what may, even if they're highly injured, keep up to the herd, because otherwise they will be taken down. That's in their instinct to do that. So it's nothing to do with enjoying it. In fact, there's so much fear and anxiety and stress and adrenaline surging through their bodies.
Absolutely.
I think there's all sorts of things I wanted to kind of like compare just very, very, very quickly, because we don't have time to do everything, but comparing, people have sort of done some great memes with comparing social isolation here now in our downtime with how horses are in a stable. And although that's great, like initially I was like, oh yeah, that's good awareness. Actually, it's more like we're shut in a toilet, you know, for 12 hours or 24 hours a day. It's not actually. And then I started just remembering, and I was talking to you beforehand about going to Robben Island, see where Nelson Mandela was kept incarcerated for 27 years, and seeing his mattress on the floor and his pot to piss in and a little tiny exercise yard that he could see through his window. And they basically tried to break him, and how that man went on to do what he did. But that is what keeping a racehorse is akin to, you know, that is the analogy. And then adding to that, giving them incredibly high value feeds, so they're really, you know, like ready to go, you know, really super fit and everything, but in this tiny little cage. And then the adrenaline surging through their body every time they're out racing and in training and on a track. So yeah. So I just
what I find, you know, in equal measure admirable about you and terrifying is the fact that, as you guys can see, from Jacqui is literally full of information about this to such an extent we could probably have a what, 3-4 hour conversation about the details, right? We haven't even scratched the surface.
No.
This is the tip of the iceberg. But we simply can't
Yeah,
cover it all. Now, but keep that in mind, because we're dealing with an industry so brutal and so wrong fundamentally that we literally will not be able to cover in any kind of timely manner all of the injustices, the cruelty, the barbarism that's taking place, you know. And by the way, I just want to draw attention to Dominic Dyer's comment, and hey Dom, great to see you on here, who mentions that that horses, it's not just the brutality of the racing industry. Once they stop making money for their owner, where they do get sold to for literally the low hundreds of pounds, literally, and this could be a racehorse that's made millions for its owner, they'll be sold for mere hundreds to someone who'll carve them up and serve them to dogs or make them into dog food. So while we're on that point, which is the last thing we'll talk about in terms of,
sorry, not just dog food, but live export as well.
Live export, exactly, and as right there that Dominic's talking about. It's
Tesco's sort of, like Tesco's burgers, whatever, full of horse
absolutely.
meat. So that it's kind of, there's a little less horse meat going into our food, probably. But actually, there's a big live export market for them. Yeah,
absolutely. And okay, so I think you guys get the gist, and as I've said, we try to balance. We're not just here to say this is horrific, it's not okay. That's absolutely true, it's not okay. The reason the Springwood Mindfulness Sanctuary exists is because of what Jacqui's just told you about. That's why it needs to exist, and thank God for people like Jacqui who then take that. As you know, Jacqui, I want to just acknowledge the fact, and a lot of comments that have come in acknowledge this same fact. It's, we completely appreciate and understand your I think you described it as embarrassment about being in that industry in the past.
Yeah,
we're all on a journey, and as someone has rightly said in the comments, and forgive me because I forget who I'm reading a lot of comments on the side here, that you are a more powerful voice because of that. The fact that you have transitioned from that industry into the space you're now in, delivering the message you're now delivering, carries an awful lot more weight than a guy like me who just says it because I love horses.
Times that I posted something on Facebook and people go, "You don't know what you're talking about. I've been involved in racing. My father's a trainer or whatever, and I'm like, I think I do. I think I do. And that's
powerful.
Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Most people get,
Now, before we get into the exciting, positive, beautiful stuff, I want to just mention also Dom Dyer, who you just saw a comment from there. A dear friend of mine, unbelievably powerful voice for animals. He's the CEO of the Badger Trust. He's also a policy advisor to Born Free, and he's probably one of the most prolific, powerful voices for all animals. He's the guy that's at all of the protests, regardless of species, regardless of issue, speaking loudly for all animals, and we love him for that. And guess what? He's going to be a guest on this broadcast as well. So I wanted to just give you the heads up on that. Stay tuned, because Dom will be with us in the next few weeks. And thank you very much, Dom, for agreeing to do that. He's a legend, and we love him. So with that lovely segue into the positive that we've just made, but always keeping in mind, that Jacqui could speak for days on end about the brutalities of the racing, and not just racing.
Please don't gamble. Just
please don't gamble. Please don't gamble. And
sweepstake or anything. It's just like a pound that. Yeah.
Walk away from it. It's just, you wouldn't, if one of your friends at work said, "I'll tell you what, there's a dog fight happening. Do you want to throw a few quid at it?" You wouldn't do it in a million years. The same is true of horse racing. Please don't ever bet on it. They say it's a cliche quote, but it's actually very true and effective. You bet, they die. That's the reality. So don't. And we'll come back to that, because we're going to leave you with that message. But what we're also going to leave you with is a warm, fuzzy feeling in your heart, which you will get when you see this film that I'm going to share with you. Which, by the way, I have to say, I had the great pleasure of visiting Springwood, and when I did, I met the man responsible for the film you're about to see, which is Callum Johnston. And I just want to say as well to you, Jacqui, that and Callum, by the way, is a fellow patron of Springwood Mindfulness Sanctuary, and rightly so. He's an absolutely brilliant filmmaker, as you're about to see for yourselves. But more than that,
And a passionate animal advocate and vegan. He's
and absolutely. And I wanted to say that more than anything, this is a very beautiful, gentle soul who, listening to him talk, is one of those profoundly insightful and reassuring things, because you're talking to someone who just is evolved, and what a beautiful man he is. And I'm pretty sure he'll be watching. If he's not, I want you guys to know this man deserves your credit for this film you're about to see. It's absolutely stunning. I'm going to push it through to you if I can. I apologize if it doesn't come through with sound, because that's the one trick to this.
What I was going to say, if you turn the sound, because the sound's a bit glitchy, isn't it, when you're doing, if you turn the sound off, I could actually speak over it about.
Perfect. Let's do that, because I think that the sound will struggle to play. But guys, it's
got a lovely soundtrack. It's on my website. Do listen to it with the soundtrack later. But actually, just to have those visuals, while I explain to you a bit about Springwood, would be really.
That would be perfect. And guys, while Jacqui mentions that, don't forget, when I flash the website and so forth up on the screen, and it's just a visual for you, Giles, the legend that he is on the comments with you, putting the link, so you can actually click on that. It's a clickable link, so you'll find the link direct to Springwood. Please go check it out, and check out this video that you're about to see but not hear. But believe me, it's absolutely stunning. And I'll let Jacqui explain, as she said, a little bit about Springwood as that is playing in the background. The visuals, courtesy of Callum Johnston.
Nice.
So tell us about Springwood, Jacqui.
Okay, so you'll see here our beautiful herd who live as a free herd. They've got a free access 24/7 to shelters and woodland, lots of enrichment, and to just come and go as they please, and they aren't separated from their herd mates at all. We work at liberty we don't work at liberty, we do everything at liberty with them, giving them their free choice and total autonomy over their body. So you'll see here a lot of ex-race horses. This is one who was in as a broodmare. This is a donkey who was in the petting farm industry. So we have rehabilitated several ex-race horses, and that's been a real journey to really listen to them and help them to release their past trauma, which is something that, isn't really generally done at all in any kind of rehabilitation way that's effective that I've come across before. So they have, it's really looking at them in a holistic sense, as I sort of said before. So they've got access to lots of wild medicinal plants that they can select for their own, benefit. Things like thistles and cleavers and hawthorn and yarrow and the list goes on. I also offer them herbs on a self-select basis, so I've been fascinated to sort of learn more about the land and how that benefits them, as well as really looking holistically at the land and conservation grazing and just how we can nurture the space around us for the wildlife who live at the sanctuary, as well as the beautiful herd that are here. And I teach mindfulness and being in the moment and letting go of anxiety and stress. And it's really great for depression and grief and all sorts of things. But it's been amazing to combine the mindfulness and animal healing and animal communication with to rehabilitate the horses. And it's also been really beautiful to share that with humans who come and volunteer or who are being who are coming on retreats and such like at the sanctuary. So just that lovely holistic combination of looking after people and the land and the herd in a really genuine listening way and helping us all to live in harmony together. And I think that's one of your guests the other day, Shannon, was saying, they were saying that the same thing of like, out in Africa of like bringing those three elements in, and it's exactly what we do here. So thistle here, lovely plant to self-select. It's really good for the liver. So yeah, just nurturing those old herbal medicine wisdoms that we had, and yeah, and mainstream drugs have kind of like tried to push under the carpet, and it's just really listening to them. Here's Rodney, one of our lovely donkeys, having a good roll in the dust. Beautiful bit of footage here.
All of it's just stunning. It's so beautiful.
Really lovely.
I'm actually secretly glad that we can't play it with sound, because it would be Callum's full responsibility for me crying for a second time on this series, because I watched it earlier on and I couldn't hold back the tears. It's absolutely stunning, and for all the right reasons. It's so beautiful. So
I don't touch them unless they come to me. So that moment with Rodney, he does quite often, and I let them, when they first came from their petting farm, they were so full of anxiety, and I let them just be for a good month or so before they even started to come in and choose. But they, as you'll bear testament to when you visited, that we don't go up and give them a cuddle unless they choose to come into our space. So it's really listening to them, using all sorts of different sort of ways of holistic care, barefoot, lots of rehabilitation, and allowing them to have that herd mentality. So we obviously don't ride them, but we don't use them for therapy either, because for me personally, I didn't find any way of doing any kind of effective therapy with people with them without taking them out of their herd, or allowing them to really be their herd and have no expectations of them. So that's, if somebody comes on a retreat or comes and volunteers, and we are in a lovely mindful space, and the herd choose to come and join us, then that's great. But actually there's just zero expectation that they could be at the other end of the land, and we can just enjoy immersing in nature and having mindfulness. So yeah, that's a little bit about.
Well, you see, and this is another one of the things that I love about you, Jacqui, is that there's a great deal of humility in what you say, as if it's just you're kind of like, oh, it's just it's not to the point of apologetic by any means, but it's just this, you minimize it. What you're doing is absolutely everything to these horses, and to a lot of these people watching
it does. And when I see horses, actually where we've moved to now, because we're sadly not living on site, we had to move last year, as maybe people who followed our journey will know. But we're now on a bridle path, so I see horses being ridden, so I am sort of having to face that reality, but a little bit, and go, whoa. But I'm in this lovely bubble most of the time, and I'm very lucky and privileged and honored to be that. And when people come, they're just immersed in that bubble, and I'm very lucky being a vegan sanctuary as well, and everything that I don't actually see a lot of reality. So to me, like, well, that's normal. It's just lovely, and that's what I want. I just want to have. I'm really supporting everybody who wants to set up a similar sanctuary or keep their animals in a similar way. And I just, if it resonates with you, what we're doing, please just get in touch. I'm really happy to support you on that. And I've learned so much from the horses themselves on what they need, and so happy to share their wisdom with everybody.
Which is really lovely of you. Thank you, because that again is a sign of a true sanctuary, because it's it really is that. Having visited, I can tell you that, as Jacqui's just described it, it's all on the horse's terms. In fact, one of the most beautiful things I remember about that visit is the fact that you, at the boundary, you stop and have others stop, and you bring them to a place. You do basically a mini meditation to ground people, to set, and you I'll never forget what you said. You said, just leave your journey here, leave the later today here. Now we're going into their land. This is their space. This is their land, their terms.
Yeah.
If they don't want to walk with us, they don't walk with us. If they come to us, then great. It was all on their terms. It's the most true sanctuary that you could possibly hope for, and for you to want to share that and further that just demonstrates, in no uncertain terms, that in fact, I'll let my friend Dom say it. There it is.
Oh,
it's absolutely true, and that's what a lot of people. Yeah, and Ariana, you might you might want to join the queue.
I mean, my dream is to have a community of like-minded souls, that, you know, we're doing this work together. We've got vegetables and flowers and sustainable living and everything. But, you know, if anybody knows of anywhere we can set up a sanctuary in a community, or if anybody knows of any farm tenancies available, then, you know, my dream is, short-term dream is to be able to live back on the land. So I'm, as you know, guardian for the land and the horses 24/7. If there's a way to make that happen, that would be amazing.
And I'm gonna break with my own tradition a little bit, and I'm gonna throw a little tiny curveball Jacqui's way, which I'm gonna just tell you exactly what happened just before we went live. Jacqui, and actually earlier in the week, Jacqui sent me an email saying I think it would be wrong to dilute any of the messages about the horses with any fundraising effort, and I agree. As I've said from the very beginning, and I'm not going to go so far as to ask for your money, but I am going to say this: is that, well, first off the back of what Jacqui just said, the dream, as you said, is to live on the land with the horses, and so collectively, I believe that we can make magic happen, and that's not necessarily dipping into our pockets. That's contacts. That's people who want to be involved in this kind of incredible endeavor. Jacqui, someone to talk to about that. So let's just set that ball rolling at the very least. But also what I want to say is that when I visited you, you showed me some things which I was kind of doing my thing of looking around and trying to not just immerse myself in the beauty and the presence of the animals, but also to be effective as a patron for you and to do some good and to help in some way. And with that in mind, I remember pointing at your shelter. I don't know whether you call it a stable or a shelter. And I said, well, you know, how much would one of those cost? And how much would this, what do you call that stuff on the ground? The
it's amazing stuff. Mud control. Big shout out to mud control. It's amazing.
Right. Is that literally what it's called? Mud control. So it's literally, it's like massive pieces of Lego flooring.
Yeah. That sits on the worst kind of mud and allows you to be able to walk. It's good stuff.
Right. And of course, as you explained to me, you know, this winter just gone, because of how wet it was, has been a really tricky one for you, and that makes it precarious for the residents, for the horses, donkeys, and ponies. Yeah. So I'm going to go out on a limb right now, and I'm going to say to you, you talked some numbers, which for me were surprisingly low, and I think we talked about 5,000 quid would cover a ton of this Lego flooring, which isn't called Lego flooring, but you know what I mean, and another shelter. We're going to do that by the time winter rolls around. I'm telling you right now, I'm committing to the fact I'm going to raise you that $5,000. That's a fact. So that's coming your way. There's no, absolutely, regardless of any other involvement of other people in on this stream or any other help that may come your way, we're going to make that $5,000 happen. That's a fact. So because having met the horses and now and also Jacqui, but now you guys having met Jacqui, you know, you can see why this is so important. These horses are in an absolutely perfect place. I've seen the word heaven written about 10 times on the comments coming down the left-hand side there, and you guys are right.
It was pretty like hell in the winter though, because it's thick clay and it does need hard standing. So yeah, that's my big thing, to make this winter not like the last, because even if we get as wet a winter as we had, we can do things like more amazing hard standing down.
Right. And I just want to give a shout out to my absolutely adorable, wonderful friend Karen Patrice, who I miss and love dearly. She's in I think you're still in Los Angeles, aren't you? Or have you gone to Maine yet? I think you're in Los Angeles. Thank you. And by the way, I've got your bunny print from Roxy the zoologist as well, so I'll post that to you. It's my treat. I bought it for you. I promise I didn't do it because of thinking this would happen, but I know that so many of the wonderful people that we're connected with will be wanting to help because of what you do and because of the fact you deserve it, because you're an absolute angel to these animals, and without you, God knows where they'd be, and I don't even think I could bring myself to think about where they might be.
Thank you so much. I think it's not just the small herd that we have at Springwood though. My mission is to be a model for change for horses, you know, on a wider level. So, you know, this, you know, emulating this sanctuary kind of, you know, and having rewilding corridors, you know, around around the world, basically, of just, you know, of horses being able to live like this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's as they've said, it's if there's a horse heaven, this is it. I mean, it's absolute, and donkey and pony, of course, heaven. It's just heaven. And actually, I want to, yeah. I mean, I want to live there too. I've seen a few people say, I want to live there. That community that Jacqui was talking about, make no mistake about it, I've already signed up. I'm down for a yurt or whatever they're going to be. I'm down. Okay, well, gosh, Jacqui, if you had one message before we say goodbye to folks, if you had one message now, and I'm gonna give you guys a reiteration of Jackie's earlier message, so that you get another one, Jacqui. But if you, please don't bet on horse racing if and when it comes back. Please don't bet on it.
Please.
Under any circumstances, don't throw money into a sweepstake at work. And you know what's so powerful about that is if you're the one who says, no thanks, even if everyone else is doing it, you might just plant the seed in a couple of minds by stepping back and saying, no, I can't morally do that. Please don't ever bet on horses. I know most of the people watching this live won't ever. But it's about spreading that message. It's about talking to our friends, family, colleagues. Please don't ever do it. But Jacqui, how about you? What would you like to leave people with if you had one message you could leave them with in terms of Springwood, in terms of horses, in terms of life in general, in terms of mindfulness? What would you like to leave people with?
Just one. I think it would be that actually places like ours don't even exist, don't need to exist, because my dream is to spread them around the world and have this sanctuary so rescue places are looking after you know, the rescue horses and all the animals in a natural way as possible, and really acknowledging their needs. But actually, you know, there isn't any more breeding. And we have our native ponies in Exmoors and Bodmin moors and stuff, and we have our previously farmed animals in lovely rewilding corridors, having conservation model, you know, conservation grazing, and actually, yeah, just in, you know, that is my dream, that actually we don't even need to have sanctuaries. That, you know, so that's where I'm. Yeah, but all the time that, you know, there are horses in you know, in need, then yeah, to just try and spread the word as much as possible. That
absolutely,
yeah, to look them in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot with you've done a lot of lovely talks with the wildlife conservation and stuff, and I think actually we've got a million horses in this country in captivity, whether
absolutely.
that's the ridden horse just in a stable next door to you, or whether that's in racing. So, you know, actually looking at them and doing something about giving them species appropriate care.
Absolutely. And on that note, and again, I know you don't want to turn this into a fundraising effort, but a very, very pertinent questions coming from Alison. Do you do adoptions?
We have sponsorships. So on our website, we do sponsorships for the herd. So you can sponsor a herd member for £10 a month, and we will update you with, you know, with things about them and stuff. And all sponsors are very welcome to come and visit. We're not open to the public, but sponsors are very welcome to come and visit. Again,
true sanctuary, because you as you just said, you know, how easy would it be to open to the public and give people some kind of an experience, but then that wouldn't be on the animal's terms.
No.
So Jacqui's putting her money where her mouth is. It really, and imagine a better spent £10 a month. I mean, how many of us don't spend more than that on coffee? Not that I'm saying let's give up the coffee, because I know I couldn't, but let's do both. Let's do both.
I think it's very, you know, we are privately funded, and I think actually I'm sorry, but I would just like to say that actually,
please do.
As far as we don't take any money from the racing industry, which a lot of ex-race horse charities do, and I think that's why people don't feel like they can speak out, because they're getting funding from them, because the racing industry then can salve their conscience and go, there you go, we're putting into, you know, when they're retired, they go into this lovely place, and it's like, no, that's bullshit. I'm not having blood money. I'm going to out and go, what they do is wrong, and I don't want their paltry little bit of amount of money to make themselves feel better. Actually, no money can make, you know, it just needs to stop.
Well said. Well said. Now, what I'm going to take the chance to do two things. One, I'm going to acknowledge Sasha's comment right here. More than spreading the word that there's a number of small animal rescues that need help. I'm also a proud patron for the One Voice for Animals UK appeal.
Right.
I would like to say, Sasha or Val or any of you guys involved in One Voice for Animals UK, I would like to have someone on from that appeal, and we'll dedicate an episode to that exact message that Sasha is referring to there. So please, drop me a line and we'll get that in the diary for sure. Jacqui, I think you've got something you want to say.
I'm so glad that came up, because that was something that I was going to say. That Val has done an amazing job at setting up that database, supporting, us and, so many small animal sanctuaries and rescue centres around the UK.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Val. Thank you.
Yeah. And to your point, as you mentioned about, we have our own homegrown problems here. We're gonna be dealing with elephants and rhinos and lions and pangolins and whatever else we need to deal with. But we have our own problems here right now, as you said, with horses suffering. We also have problems with badgers. That's why Dom Dyer is going to come on, talk about the ludicrousness and brutality and cruelty and unnecessary nature of the badger cull. And what as I said, what a powerful voice he has, and we'll all spread the message about that. And we can draw a line under these things. We've done it with the ivory trade. We've done it with fox hunting. They tried to lift the ban. Remember, 5,000 people stood outside Downing Street and said, "Oh no, you don't," and they didn't. And they just dismissed the appeal. In fact, where I last saw Dom, the two of us spoke outside the Court of Justice in London, where that appeal was taking place, and thankfully, that appeal has been dismissed. So it can work, and it will work, and we'll keep our foot on the gas, and absolutely, in fact, no, not gas, electric cars, please. We'll keep our foot on the electric car pedal, and we will turn these things around together. That's how we're going to do it. Now, one final thing before we say a huge thanks and goodbye to Jacqui. My next guest on Saturday at 7 p.m. is this is what I love about this. I don't know, my job, which of course is entirely voluntary and nothing I'd rather be doing. Here we are speaking with an absolute angel for the horses, ponies and donkeys that she looks after and may I say commits and dedicates her life to, unquestionably. And so we're going from an angel to conservation royalty on Saturday, when I'll be talking at 7 p.m. to none other than Virginia McKenna from the Born Free Foundation.
Wow. Amazing.
Virginia is one of my greatest inspirations and heroes, and I know she is to many of you guys, and we're so lucky to be hearing from her. And we, as you guys know, we heard from Will on Saturday, and he announced that. So for anyone who wasn't here on Saturday with Will's broadcast, his mum, Virginia McKenna, is going to be my guest on Saturday at 7 p.m. So please join us for that. And I know that Virginia is really looking forward to it, and can't wait to talk to you guys. And I can't wait to see her again and talk to her. So join us then. And finally, Jacqui. Actually, well, finally, Karen's question about Kiki. So what you guys don't know is that tonight I'd set this up next to me. There's Kiki's plate of nuts. She hasn't shown up, and I'm such a softie. When she did this the other night, I was really worried. I was phoning people saying, I don't know what I do. She didn't come for dinner. She didn't come home for dinner. Of course, she's not a young teenage daughter. She's just a wild squirrel who is absolutely free. And it was really lovely. When I said to Will, talking about Will Travers, I said to him before we went live, how do you feel about being interrupted by a squirrel? Because that could happen. And he said, and you'll love this, Jacqui, he said, as long as it's on the squirrel's terms.
Good. Absolutely.
so yeah, I don't know, Karen. I don't know where Kiki was.
Got to.
But Kiki comes all the way into my. She's obviously out. She's at some kind of a squirrel get together. Jacqui, from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of so many people who are watching now and who I know will watch this after the event, I haven't got the words to thank you sufficiently for what you do for those animals and the beautiful human being that you are. Please never change.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you so much for all of your support and for being, mutual appreciation, beautiful human being that you are. Thank you, Dan.
It's an honor. And guys, one last message: go over to the web address that Giles has put into the comments, where you will find the video that you saw with sound, courtesy of Callum Johnston. Prepare yourselves though, get the tissues ready, but for all the right reasons. It will be happy tears that you'll be crying. It's one of the most beautiful pieces of footage you'll ever see. And Jacqui, we love you. Thank you.
Love you too. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Love you all. Spread the love and stay safe. And we'll see you Saturday at 7 o'clock. Night, everyone.